Hello there, and thanks for joining us. I'm James Downey from CP Feeds, and today I'm with Dr. Amy Radunz from Purina Animal Nutrition. Dr. Amy is the technical beef specialist for the state of Wisconsin, and she's a huge asset for us to work together with beef producers and beef products to maximize profitability. On that note, today, obviously, feed costs are high. Your beef prices are not the very best if you're selling animals. What are your thoughts, Dr. Amy, on getting some high feed efficiency, more turns through their operation, and maximizing the profitability in today's markets?
It's probably even more critical that I guess how I look at it is, how do we make the best use of your corn, right? Or even reduce the amount of corn you're going to have. So I run the gamut sometimes in diets of where we're on a corn and pellet program all the way to a more forage finish option. And at the end of the day, it's going to take the same amount of corn to finish this calf. The question is, how long is it going to take, right? So do you want it to take 1 year, or do you want it to take 2 years? And that additional year costs you quite a bit in terms of other feedstuffs that you're going to feed, right? Bedding, you have more manure to haul. All of these things are additional costs to keeping that animal longer, even though you might be feeding more forage. But you'll probably end up doing the same amount of corn at the end of the day if you really look at those numbers.
I think your most benefit is if you own the corn the whole way through. Talk us through a little bit on, maybe storing or at least processing that corn and how to maximize it throughout that whole life cycle.
Yeah. Well, I think corn processing is a discussion to have. And some of that, again, depends upon how you're feeding those cattle and what's the diet. Okay. So I do encourage you, again, work with the folks at CP, and I'm more than happy to have some of those discussions. I think, because we have many folks who used to work, used to have dairy farms, right? And we hear a lot about corn processing and getting that process finally and getting the most efficiency out of that corn, which in a dairy scenario and that type of diet makes a lot of sense. But when we go to a finishing diet that's a majority corn, what we have to start to consider is we can tip the scale the wrong way there, because we can start to induce things like subacute acidosis. And that may not always be as prevalent, but what starts to happen there is we start to damage the ruminants, particularly on calves that are, we're starting them at 300 pounds on a corn diet to 14. I mean, that's a long period of time, right? So what we need to be a little bit careful there is based off of what type of roughage, how much roughage, what I'm feeding, what is the best corn processing method. There's actually places where I recommend whole corn. Some I recommend cracked corn. I have no problem with high moisture corn. I just don't want to process it as finely because, again, we probably push that edge of subacute acidosis. And so really it's looking at this balancing act between how do I keep the rumen healthy, right? Push feed efficiency. And if you even look at whole corn versus cracked corn, there's about a 4 to 5% difference in the amount of starch. If we measure, I know you may go see whole corn, you'll see corn kernels, right, in the manure if it's whole corn, and people look at that. But if we actually measure fecal starch, 90% of that starch has been utilized. So we still do a good job of getting that utilized, but them chewing on that corn and ruminating a little bit more can be a better health benefit. And we may actually get better performance off of those cattle, right, than we would if we would use fine ground high moisture corn. So I think really taking a look at that. In addition, that subacute acidosis, another kind of negative consequence of us pushing too fine of corn and too fast of a starch fermentation rate is we can have liver abscesses. And that's another big concern by packers, and it's hurting performance too, because again, basically the liver's fighting off an infection, right? Because we've had a leaky gut situation. So that's where we want to make sure we have the right fit for what you're doing on your farm.
Absolutely. And Dr. Amy has been a huge asset for us. She's available for farm visits. Our staff here at CP Feeds is ready to serve you as well. And it's been a lot of fun for us to dive into the beef world a little bit, look at these big picture items, and try to maximize what farmers can do on their farm.